welcome. Madurai Veeran is here. He's the most combative politician from Tamil Nadu visible on television screens. So in some ways, Omar, he symbolizes the idea of dissent in the economic and financial world. He has been speaking an outspoken critique of the government on fiscal federalism and the methods that they've been adopted, and has espoused the cause of fiscal federalism, I think, most passionately and in great lucidity and articulation. So that was really nice to see, and I think students of finance and economics sitting behind should know a little more about you. But today we are discussing the Tamil Nadu model. And I'm an old fan of this model, so we are in some ways in a similar. So in pre-independence era, I don't know how many students you know, Madras municipality used to give free food to school students. I think it was the Swatantra Party and Rajaji who used to do it. And then K. Kamraj, as the chief minister, expanded it. And thereafter in 1983 under MGR, it was universalized in Tamil Nadu. Now, not many people know that two of the largest funded programs in India originated from an idea in Tamil Nadu. And one of them is the midday meal schemes, which has propelled India's literacy, India's enrollment numbers, and the way the government at the center looks at welfare of students. It has brought down. And there are several studies. If students are interested, you should look up World Bank studies on malnutrition, on better education, on enrollment and others. But this midday meal scheme actually created the room for another idea. Mr. N.T. Ramarao in the neighboring state of Andhra Pradesh introduced the 2 rupees per kilo rice idea, which today is the National Food Security Act, which was passed in 2013. Till recently, people had to pay for that ration, and now they're getting it free. 800 million people in India get free ration, and that's the second one. I'm sure there are other ones. I recall the more interesting ones as the ones that were done for maternal mortality, maternal health, which is again a World Bank recognized program. But for the youngsters, if Chennai and the area around Chennai is called the Detroit of the South or Detroit of India, it is because Tamil Nadu created the model for the ecosystem of automobiles and automobile giants. Almost 50 to 100 Fortune 500 companies are here. So there is a Tamil Nadu model at play, and we recognize that. I will ask you to speak about the Tamil Nadu model, and maybe we'll have some questions and then some questions from the audience. But the one striking thing that you must explain is, how does Tamil Nadu fund all this?
First, thank you for inviting me. Second, let me just correct a factual error. The free food in Madurai, in Chennai, what was then Madras Corporation, was started by the Justice Party, in 1921. One last caveat, I am the establishment. I am a finance minister in a large industrial state, one of the biggest economies in the country. If I am seen as a voice of dissent, something is structurally wrong.
But you are,
right?
but you are seen as the voice of dissent in the GST Council.
No, I agree. That means something is structurally wrong, because a man who should be riding the establishment train, if I am the one having to point out a lot of things, something must be structurally wrong. So let's leave that for a second. I think the core difference of the Tamil Nadu model, what we call the Revdi model, or what one would have called the Justice Party model going back to the 20s, is a focus on human development, in the sense that if you have a stratified society where opportunities for education are restricted to some, where opportunities for employment are restricted to some, by definition, you cannot have a weighted average productive kind of workforce, right? You're keeping people suppressed. Now, we could not have envisioned that 100 years from the first Justice Party government, we would have a global economy, and therefore weighted average productivity would be the single best predictor of your competitiveness, because you're no longer competing just state to state. Like our greatest competition is Vietnam for the ex-China trade, right?
Maybe you should explain that in one line.
Yeah. No, I'm saying as people are de-risking China and as they're moving their supply chains and their operations out of China, and the financial services companies are moving it out of Hong Kong, then the natural kind of destinations are India at a country level, but within India, Tamil Nadu for various reasons, for the workforce, for the mass of existing companies that already do that, for the connectivity of the internet wires, for various reasons. Mostly the workforce availability, Tamil Nadu is a natural destination within India. But when we compete, of course, some of them also come to Kerala, to Telangana or Gujarat or other places. But by far our greatest competition, especially in the manufacturing space, especially in high-end services, is Vietnam. And that's just the way the economic model works out. We are like a middle-income country. We're about 4,000 US dollars per capita income. We have a very high tertiary education ratio. About 52% of our young children of college-going age enroll in a college. Almost all of them speak English. Therefore, we have a globally competitive workforce with relatively high skill and relatively low labor costs compared to most kind of advanced destinations. But if I go back to my original point, the point was that we wanted opportunity for all, education for all. The original legislation for compulsory elementary education passed in 1921 under Dayaki said boys and girls in 1921. Equal education for boys and girls in 1921. So in various ways, we did social justice as the core of everything. And in some sense, that's very similar to Singapore. If you've heard Senior Minister Tharman Shanmugaratnam talk about the Singaporean model and how they went from $400 or $450 per capita to $45,000 per capita income in less than 50 years or so, the model of the late Lee Kuan Yew was to engineer the society and the economy would progress. Make sure that everybody's educated, everybody's got nutrition, you have communal harmony, you design the housing estates and the primary schools in such a way that the ethnic Malays and the ethnic Chinese and the ethnic Indians, many of them Tamils, have to get along, and you build this harmonious society, you give quotas, only so many people can congregate in one place, you can't have a building block that's 80% Chinese, and you engineer the society in such a way that the productivity, the opportunity, the investment comes. Now, Singapore had some other advantages geographically, just like Tamil Nadu has some other advantages, but the building block is human capital and a harmonious society, and I think that's the hallmark of the Tamil Nadu model.
So, that's the rationale, and that it has been recognized also in terms of the human development indicators and other aspects. But there is also this question that comes up now, and I don't know whether the word is popular here or heard before. Some of what is being done in Tamil Nadu or by regional parties has a nomenclature now in Delhi. Some years back, I had done some study about manifestos, and I found that Tamil Nadu even gave goats, promised goats and gave goats to people. And it led me to sort of examine whether there was any change, and the subsequent animal census showed that the goat population had gone up. Now, that might be a correlation or there might be a coincidence, but I don't know whether there was a causation. But coming to the things that, the perception is that much of what is done by parties in Tamil Nadu is to buy votes, and that's how welfare is born. And the phrase that is used frequently in Delhi is the Revdi culture or the freebie culture. Do you think the Tamil Nadu welfare model rests on freebie culture, or how would you like to sort of contest that view?
As with everything, I'll answer this in about 6 different layers of depth. So let's start with the first one. The word Revdi and all is yesterday's word, right? It was spoken by somebody at some rally and it caught on. Otherwise, I didn't know I hadn't heard the word Revdi like 1 year back. So Revdi is not there. Freebie culture, I had heard 100 times before. So let's look at it as that perspective. I think back in 2018 or something, I had given a long exposition. I said, you know, every government everywhere in the world provides something for free to its citizens. Maybe it's free road transport without charging tolls. Maybe it's free education at government schools. Maybe it's free healthcare at government hospitals. So saying freebie culture again is kind of a low level IQ thing. It's not sophisticated people shouldn't engage in this. Then you go to the definition which the 15th Finance Commission used, or the terms which then, it's a populist measures, which the then Finance Minister through Arun Jaitley put in. And I argued in front of the 15th Finance Commission, and now my now friend through N.K. Singh, who is the chairman of the Finance Commission, would agree. I said, who gets to define what is populist? Do you as the Finance Commission get to decide? Do the people get to decide? Is there an economic textbook definition of whether I give 5 kilos of rice, it's essential food, and I give 8, it's populist? These are all nefarious concepts. Populist is easy to say the word, but how will you categorize a measure as populist or not populist? Then you see political hypocrisy that has no, limits. The same people who are telling us about Revdi and all in the Himachal Pradesh election, my counterpart and good friend, the Union Finance Minister, published a statement showing the 50 things they promised for free were they to get elected in Himachal Pradesh. They didn't, that's a different story. So is it that when they promise it, it's considered development measures, and if we give it, it's considered freebie? I mean, these are all meaningless, this is just political posturing. Let's go down to the real issue. The real issue is, if we provide things for free, some of them will be accretive, they will add more value to society than me spending that money any other way. Some of them will be mixed, they will add some value, but also create inflation and create other problems. If you want, I'm happy to give you examples. And some of them will be downright bad. For example, since I have no political angle here, I'll take the cow and goat scheme. Both of them were introduced by our predecessor, late Chief Minister, Ms. Jayalalitha. It turned out the goat scheme was quite successful, as you say, because sourcing goats was not that hard. There was already enough hybrid genetic kind of composition in the goat population. And it was much easier to breed goats, and they were productive in multiple ways, from milk to mutton to everything else, and they were relatively easy to feed. So the goat scheme actually was quite successful. I mean, it reached some limits, but that's a different story. It allowed women to make a decent living and again. The cow scheme turned out to be almost impossible to implement. And I say this because I was a member of the Public Accounts Committee and saw a whole bunch of AG reports, audit reports. Because the way they designed the scheme, just think about the complexity now. If I have to give somebody a free cow, the question is, where do I source the cow from? If I source the cow from within the state, I got 2 problems. One, the total population of cows doesn't increase. That means I'm just circulating the cows between some buyers and other buyers, and the market's intervening into an efficient, the government is intervening into an efficient market and will distort it. And I'm going to have genetic inbreeding. So then the logic was that you go and get the cow from outside. The question is, who will buy the cow and who will accept the cow as a donation from the government or a benefit from the government? So then they came up with a smart idea. No, you should take the beneficiary with you on the trip to Andhra Pradesh or Karnataka or someplace, to the mandi, to the cow exchange, the market. And then you should jointly select the cow. Then the local farmer says, by looking at a cow, I can't tell whether it's a good cow or not. I need to know whether it milks properly or not. I said, okay, no problem. 3 days average milking, and then you'll decide whether it's a good cow, and then that can be bought and brought back. How many cattle markets do you know where they'll let you check out a cow for 3 full days? None. So effectively, the scheme became unimplementable. They just, either the beneficiary wouldn't go or they'd bring some cow back and say, no, no, but now the cow doesn't produce milk, and it became unimplementable and we stopped doing it. So having an idea is one thing, executing is something else different. Take the MNREGA, right? Take the MNREGA, excluding when you have a pandemic and there's no work and nobody has any income. Under normal circumstances, if we pay people, let's say 200 rupees a day for X number of days a year, and they do some real work, then we are getting a win-win-win. Those people get a subsistence income, the state gets some work done and probably cheaper than giving it to a big contractor and allowing corruption and stuff like that. And the society gets the benefit of the newly built Anganwadi or the dike in the river or the cleaning of the temple tank or whatever it is. But if you pay people to do nothing, now what you're doing is you are actively creating inflation. Because what you're doing is in the rural areas, you're paying people 200 rupees a day to do nothing. If they do nothing, then the people who do something will ask now for daily wages of 400 or 500 rupees so that they are compensated fairly. Those are the people working on agricultural output. That means the input cost of the rice or the whatever crop goes up. That means the output crop price goes up. So now what you have effectively done is you've injected money for zero extra productivity and you've increased the liquidity and kept the input cost high and kept the output the same. That is the definition of inflation. You have just created inflation. So these schemes need to be thought of very, very carefully, thoughtfully. Sometimes it's in money, sometimes it's in insurance value. Like if we used to give gold for, even though we didn't start it, I was okay with it because it prevented somebody from having to go and take a loan. And there's no an unsecured credit in the bank, right? If they take a loan, they're taking it on the street at usurious rates of interest. But the problem was that the previous government, they fell behind by 4 years. So if the wedding happened today, you'd get your gold 4 years from now. How is that going to prevent you from taking a loan today? So it became infructuous. It became useless 4 years from now. We don't even know if they're still married.
Where do you place the TV, mobile phone?
I don't think anybody gave mobile phone. Mobile phone we give only to disabled people who need special communication. Right now the government of Tamil Nadu gives mobiles only to people with disabilities. But the TV we gave at that time, we gave the TV as a principle of social justice. We didn't realize the benefits we were going to get from it. We gave it as a principle of social justice because we went from having one Doordarshan kind of channel to an explosion of cable and few OTTs like we have, but now there's many more. And what would happen in villages is that the poor people would go and stand outside the rich people's windows to watch the TV through the window because they couldn't afford their own TV. So our chief minister, our late leader and late chief minister, Shankkar Aiyar, he wanted to make sure that nobody had to go and stand outside somebody's house for 2 hours, 3 hours watching TV through the window. And so he said, we'll give them, they were cheap, they were like 2,000 rupees, they were like a small CRT screen. But now you see all the studies and it turns out that giving village people the awareness of what the rest of the world was like actually reduced domestic violence. It increased kind of other participation of women in the workforce, stuff like, these are all like Oxford University studies, these are not Tamil Nadu studies. And I can send you the references, but I don't think we envisioned all those secondary benefits when we gave it. We gave it as, and it was like, it was a few hundred crores, right? 2,000 rupees a family for a few families. It was relative to the budget, it was an irrelevant amount of money. But it was a social justice thing and it got ancillary benefits we didn't expect.
So, to come back to somebody is paying for this.
Yeah.
And while the growth is there, this is a good idea, it works. I don't know how accurate this is because when I first saw this number, I was a little taken aback. The Reserve Bank of India's recent state finances report says that all the states put together in India offer subsidies of 3 lakh crore something. And Tamil Nadu tops it with 1 lakh crore or something. So I'm a little struck by that number, but is Tamil Nadu the highest in subsidies? In terms of, in the non-development expenditure scheme, Tamil Nadu is behind Uttar Pradesh and 2 other states. But how do you sort of the more important question is, how do you fund this?
Yeah, so either you are implying a point in time issue or you're implying a historic issue. So let me just address the historic issue first because I think that's more meaningful.
No, of course historical, because this is a trend in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So let me put it a different way. When the FRBM Act was introduced in the Parliament and passed under the late Prime Minister Thiru Vajpayee, and equivalent acts were passed in all the states. At that time, Tamil Nadu's debt to GDP ratio was about 28%. And its interest to revenues ratio was about 21%. In 11 years after that, first ADMK government from 3 to 6, then DMK government 6 to 11, then ADMK government 11 to 14, before Ms. Jayalalitha's incarceration in Bangalore. In 11 years, Tamil Nadu's finances improved dramatically. We went from 28% debt to GDP down to 16. We went from 21% interest to revenue down to 11. We were the model state. We had fantastic outcomes. No other state improved that much. And all while we were doing what you would consider to be freebies or subsidies or transfers or something. I'm saying basically you have to decide which way your model works. Now I'm saying that we had 6 or 7 years of really bad economic management. I don't say that politically, I was saying it outside. The statistics show that we went back from 16-17% debt to GDP to 26-27 before the pandemic. And then we went back to a really bad interest ratio. And then last year we showed a huge improvement. This show will show another huge improvement because I'm making the budget numbers ready. And we will show such remarkable progress that in 2 years we would have wiped out probably 90% of the slide of 7 years. That's an amazing outcome. We have not in any way changed our philosophy that human development should be at the core of it. For example, my chief minister has announced a program which we funded as a pilot program last year, which we're taking up in greater scope this year, which is a free breakfast program. Now, is that a freebie? Is that Revdi? Is that development? In my mind, I couldn't have come up with a single better way to spend those few hundred crores. Because what it does, it makes sure that the kids who go, and this is first starting at elementary school, it makes sure that the kids who go to school go with the right level of nutrition or arrive with the right level of nutrition. It greatly increases their likelihood of learning properly through the course of the day. We are doing it for the corporation school or government school children who are the poorest of the poor. The great feedback we've had is, why are you not doing that for the rest of the schools? Because middle class parents, many of them are now 2 working family parents, and they're saying, I find it hard to feed my children cooked food before they go to school at 7 or 7:30 or 7:45, very early in the morning, right? Now, here's the difference though. When we do the free lunch program, we do it through the traditional way. I don't want to get into it, but I'll just say that more than 50%, in fact more than 60% of the total cost is labor. And that's not an efficient way of doing it. But in the breakfast program, what we have done, in the rural areas, we have created self-help groups of the mothers of the children who are the beneficiaries. We give a block grant to the local body. They give the money to the self-help groups. Those people procure the items, prepare the food and deliver it to their own children on the premises of the school. Do you think that's going to be high quality or not? Of course it is. I'm feeding my own child. In the urban areas, we use the latest technology, Internet of Things, as much automated as possible, and we maintain the quality and the hygiene at central kitchens for every block, and then we send the food to the actual schools. So here our labor costs are a small fraction of the total, and therefore the program is much more efficient and much more consistent quality with much less leakage and other problems. And we're not looking at 2,000 crore statewide tenders and all where there's a risk of other problems. Right? So we have greatly improved the delivery model, but the principle remains the same. We want to feed the children because that is the greatest investment we can make in our future. So our model of success starts with, let us get really well-fed, well-educated, healthy human beings. The rest of it will fall in place. Another model will say, let me build roads, let me build ports, and then they will come. Right? That's what the union government model is basically. About 5% of the budget has shifted from social spending to infrastructure. It's another matter that 60% of the projects are behind time and maybe the, Agra-Kanpur highway is like 12 lane and only like 20 years from now it will be fully utilized. That's a different matter. But they have a different model of development. We have a different model of development. Ours is producing results. Why does somebody think they can tell me what I should do differently? In every measure, in every statistic, Tamil Nadu is double or better than the Indian average. And of the states where you say they're focusing a lot on infrastructure. Let them catch up to us, then we'll see.
So hold the thought 1 minute. I want to just sort of give a background note. Almost every centrally sponsored scheme in India came out of some state. Narega is actually born as the employment guarantee scheme in Sangli. Midday meal scheme born in Tamil Nadu. You see the later versions of the PM Kisan Yojana. They were born in Telangana and in Odisha. The Jan Aushadhi schemes, the free medical scheme, was born in Tamil Nadu and in Andhra. There were several schemes, all of these were called freebies or Revdis or whatever at some point of time, and all of them have been assimilated into the national development programs. Currently, the government gives money to farmers to overcome a certain deficit. Now, all of these, you can call them flyover economics, you can call them Robin Hood economics, you can call them whatever. But the fact is that there is a general consensus that all of this has been assimilated into the program. Now, the worry at the center is that the government of India is doing X amount of welfare, its deficit level is whatever it is, and whether this is a good idea or a bad idea. I mean, I don't know how many people know that just on direct benefit schemes, the National Payment Corporation of India, which is where the money goes from the government to the individual, which you receive the OTP and the SMS saying that your money is come, NPCI has listed 8,000 plus user codes for welfare schemes, out of which maybe half are not functioning. Government of India runs something like 310 direct benefit transfer schemes. I don't know how much. But the central question to this is, Mr. Minister, is that yesterday I was reading a report put out by Dr. C. Rangarajan and K. N. Shanmugam about Tamil Nadu being a $1 trillion economy, and they examined whether this could happen in 2030, and they have come to the conclusion that it could probably happen in 2034, or that it will require a 9% consistent growth. Now, we also know that Tamil Nadu is on the wrong side of the demographic story in the terms of your replacement rate. I mean, I don't know how many people here, youngsters, there are not too many people following you, because the replacement rate in Tamil Nadu is 1.4, which is the lowest in India. It's the outcome of development, it's an outcome of education, and it's also an outcome of women's empowerment. Tamil Nadu has the highest number of women working in manufacturing, and that says something, I think, about the socio-culture of the state. But if you have to grow at 9%, and if you have a high sustained expenditure which is classified in whatever way as non-development, what are the steps that you would like to take? One of the criticisms or one of the points that Dr. Rangarajan's report says is the non-profitability or lack of profitability of the state public sector units. There's also some emphasis on, so where would you, I mean, to move up that 9% thing, you will have to lift the economy to a higher value chain, just like you spoke about Vietnam and Tamil Nadu experience. So what's the plan?
I'll say there are 3 or 4 steps. The first, I think, is keeping our fisc in balance. That means the FRBM Act said 0% revenue deficit, 3% fiscal deficit. And as I said, for 11 years, we largely followed that, especially the 5 years of the DMK government, 6 to 11, despite the global financial crisis, despite some pay commission, major changes in wages and benefits to the pensioners. It was a net surplus revenue government. 5 years, there was a revenue surplus. So what you're trying to say is that the difference between borrowing for revenue expenses, even though they may be good expenses like free food to school children or free laptops, as opposed to building roads or ports or hospitals or drinking water systems, there's a different multiplier effect. Possibly, to some extent, at the gross level, yes. So the idea is to bring the revenue deficit down to 0 and put as much of your borrowing into capital expenditure as possible. I'll come back to that in a minute. As far as the PSUs go, it's relatively clear that many of them have been mismanaged badly. The Tamil Nadu electricity, the previous TNEB, that's now TANGEDCO, TAN Transco, TAN Disco and all that, collectively went from 45,000 crores of debt to 1,45,000 crores of debt in the 7 years that Ms. Jayalalitha was not there. The Tamil Nadu Civil Supplies Corporation that never carried more than 3,000 or 5,000 crores in debt is now carrying some 15 or 17,000. So there has been a lot of mismatch. So we have done 2-3 things already. One is that we re-examined the existing model and we reissued an updated model from the finance department that says because the government of Tamil Nadu is the 100% shareholder in many of these PSUs, in addition to your board, these are the limits beyond which, if you want to take any major decisions, you have to actually come back to the government of Tamil Nadu through the finance department's division called BPE, Bureau of Public Enterprises. And without our explicit approval, you cannot do these things anymore. So that put a complete check, and that's a revolutionary step, at least as far as the last 10 years concerned. 10 days ago, we revealed that we have improved the infrastructure for reporting. Otherwise, some PSUs were giving their statements, annual statements, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years late.
Do all your PSUs report
That's
earnings?
why,
The national record is pathetic.
That's why we put in a website now where we are requiring the boards of these companies to report at least internally to us for local audit, internal audit, in a timely manner because they can't use the external auditor as a basis. So I would say we have taken a lot of steps to bring the PSUs under some kind of control.
Whether you know, in the CAG reports of the last year shows that public sector undertakings, state-owned public sector undertakings in West Bengal, Uttar Pradesh, in Madhya Pradesh, in many of the states have not submitted accounts for like a decade, for 5 years, 7 years.
When I was in the opposition, I was a member of the Public Accounts Committee for 5 years. So I've read many hundreds of paras and many audit reports. The Tamil Nadu version about 2 years ago was that there were 300 plus corporations, boards, regulatory authorities, entities that had not filed for at least 2 years, right? 300 plus. So it's endemic, but we're going to fix all that. Now let me come back to the revenue and capital business. As it turns out, we are improving the revenue deficit so rapidly, right? We just got the updated GSDP numbers. So in 2021, the last year before we took office, the fiscal deficit was 5.21%, of which 3.5 or 3 3/4 of it was simply the revenue deficit. Now we'll give them some benefit for the first year of COVID. The previous year was not that much better. It was, let's say, 4.5 or 4.6. Last year, we brought it down to 338 on the old estimate or 357 in the new estimate. But the big difference was that the entire savings was in revenue deficit. So we took the revenue deficit down out of this 3.5 or so to only about 1.8 or something like that. This year, we're going to publish the numbers. We've given some interim report to the assembly already. So based on that report, I would project, I can't say the actual numbers because I'm bound by confidentiality, but we will now be trending towards maybe 1.25% only revenue deficit and the rest fiscal. Because let's be very clear, in a growing economy, it is the job of the government to borrow up to 3%. Not only is it a ceiling, it's a floor. Because government borrowing comes at the lowest cost, is invested in the highest multiplier projects, and gets executed with the least risk if you do it right. So in fact, borrowing for capex, for investment is a good thing. That's what we're supposed to do. That's what gives us the multiplier effect. Now we have a different problem. Because we once used to borrow only for capex, I told you, right? We had a revenue surplus state. So we only borrowed for capex. We had the execution capability between the government and all the contractors and vendors and everybody together. We could actually execute up to 3% of GDP in projects because the state kept spending less and less and less. We have now come to a point where last year and most likely this year, we are going to miss our capital spending targets, not because we didn't have money, but because we couldn't execute fast enough. Now last year, we had the floods, almost floods of 2015. This year we had a bounce back, but again, there are systems don't stand around waiting for you to have the money. If you don't spend the money, the capacity decays. And so what has happened now for us is that if we are on this trajectory, as I've said, latest by 24, 25, or maybe 25, 26, we'll be a revenue neutral state. At that time, our GSDP will be 30 lakh crores. At least. At that time, we'll have to invest at least 90,000 or 1 lakh crores. Where are we going to find the execution capability? So now my bottleneck is not money anymore. It's execution capability. And for that, I think we have to look at PPP models. We have to look at people who are willing to put their own capital and skin in the game. Not because we need the capital, but because we need their talent, their discipline, their professionalism, their execution skill. Then we'll get the outcome. Yeah.
And the number of people for that.
And the engineering expertise, the experience of having done these projects elsewhere in the world, that kind of people. It's not just the human beings. I mean, it's not just the sheer number of people, but it's the experts that we need.
So, just for a layman's understanding, will Tamil Nadu be able to grow at a fast enough pace to afford this level of spending, or will it be stretching its legs outside the blanket?
Again, I tell you, right, the world, I'm a former investment banker, the world is awash with money. If you provide the right framework, the right environment, the right confidence level to investors, whether they are financial investors who are buying bonds and equity and mutual funds and capital shares in an alternate investment manager or venture capital, or whether they're the global corporates that are coming and setting up car factories or chip factories or iPhone manufacturing facilities. If you provide them the right environment, the right talent pool, reasonable ease of doing business, and reasonable kind of quality of life for the expats and the people, you can get unlimited amounts of investment. There is no shortage at all in the world. We are not capital constrained. The one who agrees with me the most on this is Thiru Nitin Gadkari. We were both at a ceremony in Delhi.
You know you're a dangerous company.
Is that we can raise unlimited amounts of money. India is such a shining story in the global environment. You provide the right environment, there is unlimited amount of money. It is the execution skill. It is the framework. It is the environment. These are the things that good governance and good governments can provide. The money will come. I'm saying I wasn't able to spend the money last year that I budgeted to spend. I don't need other people's money. If I want, there's a lot of money.
So, yeah, the absorptive capacity and the execution are all this. Now we have 3 minutes. You're here, you're from Madurai, the finance minister from Madurai in the center. We can't let you go without your comments on what you thought of the budget and whether we will really grow between 6 to 6.8 or 6.4. There is a perception that you completely diametrically differ from the way the government in Delhi thinks about development, growth, economic progress. So one way to express this, how you diametrically differ from the government or don't differ, is to sort of give us an analysis, a quick 3-minute analysis of the union budget.
Look, I have been loath to go on TV, both for personal relationships with a lot of the senior officials, the finance minister, the finance secretary, all good personal friends of mine. And, it's a difficult job. I would say, as long as somebody says what they do and does what they say, then the people get to decide. I have a completely different model. I want to focus on human development, quality of life, equality, keeping the stratification of society low, and I know that will attract the right level of investment and talent and give me the right outcome. That's my view of the world. It's been validated to some extent over 100 years of the development of Tamil Nadu. The Gujarat view of the world, which is now the Indian government's view of the world, you must have seen the Economist article, the Gujaratification of India after the Gujarat poll, is that you actually get national champions or state champions, you give them a lot of money, they build a lot of factories, and then you'll get trickled down to the people and all that stuff, and therefore you'll see you'll see poverty alleviation and you'll see better outcomes in education. All that. In fact, that has not proven to be true. Gujarat and Tamil Nadu have roughly the same per capita income, as the economist pointed out, but their poverty rate is 4 times higher than ours, and only 50% of the girls at 18 have gone through high school. Right? So we have completely different society. It's okay. As long as I say these are my values, I act according to these values, and I get the right outcome, the people can decide if that's what they want or not. What worries me a lot about the union government is that they say they're for the poor. They say that they're putting more schemes. They say that they're sending money into the benefits of the poor. But in fact, the numbers don't reflect that. And whatever execution problem I have, they have a much bigger execution problem because they have a much bigger execution ambition. So broadly, I would say the twist away from progressive taxation and progressive spending, more to the poor, more from the rich, is antithetical to my approach of how I would frame my budget. And when my budget comes out, at least there'll be a comparison to say, what is the difference in kind of the priorities of this, right? But at the end of the day, what does it matter, my philosophy, your philosophy? A budget is a statement of intent. Only when the final account comes out a year and a half later, you'll know what was actually achieved. The numbers vary so much between, at least for me, I try to keep it down. But in the union government, the numbers can vary by 1 lakh or 2 lakh crores between the budget and the final account. So let's wait for the outcome. The outcome will tell us, which approach was right or wrong and what did it achieve. And did it achieve what you said you wanted to achieve? These are all the benchmarks that we should all be held accountable to. And then we'll know, who's doing what job.
No, your arguments are always reasonable. You have a sound rationale to all your arguments. Today I found there's a bit of diplomacies laced in your comments. So that is a new addition to...
maybe I'm finally growing up.
Yeah. So let's push you a little more. Push you a little more.
Yeah.
What's the one thing that they did you wouldn't do, and what's the one thing that they didn't do that you would have done?
I would have tried to make the taxation regime more progressive. Right now, too much of the tax revenue comes from the poor and middle class, and too little of it comes from the rich. And I don't have that power as a state minister because we don't have any of the progressive taxation tools constitutionally. They're only over there.
Agriculture?
No, but yeah, I'm not sure I can have a tax independent of the union, but let's, the thing that they do a lot that I wouldn't do is that this centrally sponsored scheme stuff. And, at first it only used to be people like me who you consider kind of, what did you say?
The dissent.
Dissent. Now the dissent seems to have spread because when I was in the finance minister's meeting with the Honorable Union Finance Minister in Delhi in November, state after state with the BJP, pure BJP or BJP coalition government asked the questions that I always used to ask. I say, why do you take so much in cesses and surcharges? Why don't you put it into the divisible pool and give it to us? Why do you call it centrally sponsored scheme and then intrude into state subjects that you're not supposed to be in? Why do you call it PM ABC, but you put only 20% of the money and we put 80% of the money and you still call it PM ABC? These questions which only people like DMK and South used to ask, Northern and BJP and Western states are asking these questions now. So I think this is a healthy sign in a democracy because we can't all be rebellious and dissenters by nature, right? I mean...
the virus is spreading.
I don't know about that. Or logic or patriotism for the citizens of our state relative to being respectful to the leader. That way, yeah.
Do we have time for 2 questions, Kaveri? Okay, 2 questions from the students. Just 2 questions.
Happy morning, sir.
Name first. Name, institution, and question. Short question. No speech.
I'm Praveen from MGR University. Will state government face some burden if central government brings GST on petrol and diesel?
Listen, I've answered this multiple times. I'll be as brief as possible. The logic of bringing something into GST is to state that it has a standard rate, and currently all governments at all states and the union tax petrol and diesel significantly higher than the highest rate of GST. So on one level I can see that it brings equality and all this stuff. But there are 2 nuances to this. The first is the union gets to decide how much of its taxes it will take from what source, progressive taxes like income taxes, corporate taxes, and how much from regressive. We don't have any progressive taxes. We only have to take from point of sale taxes and regressive taxes. But the more important nuance is that most of what the union takes today from the petrol and diesel, it takes as cess. So were we to go from a tax regime to a GST regime, the union could continue to levy cess independent of the GST and still take 20 or 30 rupees per litre as cess. And we would, we would lose not an insignificant amount of money, but not enough money to change my life. We'd probably lose 2 or 3 or 4,000 crores were we to go GST instead of that. The more philosophical reason why we oppose the union trying to homogenize the few taxes that are left with the states is that at that point we become like municipalities. If we don't get to determine any rate for anything, and the so-called GST Council, which is so-called federal, but the agenda is set by the union government, they have a 33% vote. The minimum required to pass is 75, so they have effective vote veto on everything. And for you to defeat a union government measure, because they've given one state one vote, you'll have to rally 12 states. There are not actually 12 rich net donor states in this country. So everybody's for higher taxation because they'll get more money, except the rich donor states like Karnataka, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra. So the system is rigged. And if I give up the last few levers of control that I have, then I become just an execution agency. As it is, on the way out, they decide, because they call it centrally sponsored scheme, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, finish at Z, go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 after that. Then on the way in also, they'll decide what can be collected by whom. Then what is the value of having governance here at a logical level, at an execution level? It is impossible to conceive of a homogeneous fiscal policy for a country that has such diverse states as our Indian states are. I've just told you the contrast between Gujarat and Tamil Nadu, which are already very rich states. Were I to tell you the difference between Tamil Nadu and Bihar, where the per capita income in Tamil Nadu is 4x, the gross enrollment ratio in tertiary education is 4 or 5x, then why should one homogeneous policy make sense for all these people? Nowhere else in the world do we have this kind of, administrative hallucination that you can run one policy for 1.4 billion people from Delhi and make it successful. It hasn't worked anywhere in the history of the world. It's not likely to start now.
That's a new one, administrative hallucination. I should use that on Twitter. One last question, again from a student.
Sir, warm good afternoon, sir. It was really a thought-provoking session, sir. When you were mentioning about the human development as an objective of social justice, knowing the ill effects of the alcoholism and the drug addiction, is there any possibility in the near future where we can overcome the dependency on alcohol for the revenue? As you just now mentioned that we are one of the richest states in India, and is there any possibility in the near future, sir? And I'm not asking for any specific date to be mentioned, sir.
Yeah, again, as with anything, you ask me a question, you'll get a very nuanced answer, right? I'll separate this into 2 or 3 parts. If the point is that the government of Tamil Nadu cannot run without alcohol taxes, that's not true. We can run many ways. It's 20 or 30,000 crores. It's not an insignificant number, but it's not a, kill the finances of the state number. If the point is it possible to achieve total prohibition in real terms, not in politicians speak, just for words, and then you know what can be bought in Gujarat at what time for what price. So is it possible to be a globally connected, multi-state neighbor, porous borders, state in which you can enforce prohibition? My own personal experience in life at 57 years or 56 years is that it cannot be done. It's not enforceable. I'm not saying whether it should be the right policy or not. If you go to the next level and you say, in this current somewhat restricted regime, are we really curtailing alcoholism or the ill effects of alcohol? My personal view, not. And that's independent of politics. That was not true in the previous regime. It's not true in this regime. We are probably not able to quantify the ill effects of alcohol through absenteeism, domestic abuse, health impact, all kinds of other costs of alcoholism, violence, crime. We don't know how to quantify that. We are getting some money because we see it as tax, and that also has been slipping, and a lot of fraud is happening there. That's a different story. I'm saying 10-year trajectory. I'm not talking today. So if you ask me, is this model somehow preventing the ills from entering society? The answer is absolutely not. The ills are in society. They have been for a long time. If you ask me, is there any society in the world where they don't tax undesirable activities with sin taxes? The answer is absolutely not. For that matter, we know that tobacco is extremely harmful. Probably tobacco is much more harmful to people than alcohol. You have to drink lots and lots of alcohol for a long time for you to get any bad effects. Tobacco is much earlier and you get cancer and stuff that's not curable. Why don't we ban tobacco altogether? So my point is, if you don't have an enforceable ban of practical conditions, then every society in the world taxes them very, very high because you get benefit, like, win or lose, you get benefit. Either you tax them so high that curbs consumption, or you tax them so high that whoever consumes pays some greater share into the state for the ill effects that their consumption is going to provide as a cost to the state later, in absenteeism, in health, in domestic abuse, whatever. So these are not black and white, this concept cliche that this government runs on alcohol. Complete nonsense, right? There are governments that don't have alcohol revenue that are run worse than us. There are governments that have alcohol revenues that are run better than us. So, politics is politics. Intelligent people should be nuanced and thoughtful and look at the issues with like some clarity. Sound bites are just nonsense anyway. Right?
So let me sort of add to this young man who must have attended the last session, that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. The first step you pave that road is by telling the government, allowing the government to tell you what you can eat, where, what you can drink, when you can do whatever. We just heard about dissent and freedom, young man. Just think about it.